On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Oklahoma City Thunder rip off a 3-0 week. They take care of business against bad teams, but perhaps their biggest test lies ahead on Tuesday against Dallas. We're going to preview it all.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Ryland Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by FanDuel, you can start this season with a big return at FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet by going to FanDuel.com to get started. We're joined today by Michael Martin at Michael Martin on Twitter and Blue Sky. And, of course, Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael on Sports on Twitter and Blue Sky. Michael Martin, how you feeling today after the 3-0 week that was Oklahoma City?
Feeling very good. Not all the wins came in the best fashion, but you still like to see the 3-0 and the W's in the column, and that's the most important thing. But happy to be back with a big game around the corner on Tuesday.
So we said last week that they had to go 3-0 to capitalize on their 3-1 road trip, because if you go and get some impressive wins on the road, but then you just fold over against teams that you really should beat, it kind of spoils all the goodwill you've built up. You've kind of now came back to earth sort of evenly. They didn't do that. They went 3-0 just as we kind of said they should have. I thought that this was an impressive feather in their cap for their 0-0 mindset, because oftentimes you can say those things and it be used as just kind of a tool to sidestep a question or to pass along some narrative or just kind of pacify somebody. The Thunder truly do believe in it and embody that mentality, and you saw it in all three games, where the Jazz game had some additional juice to it just because you were playing for the NBA Cup, which we found out was playing for Jay Willett and $500,000. So that was easier to get up for. You had the Toronto game where it was a homecoming for Shea, and it could have gone either way, truly. Like you could have seen them do what they've done before in Toronto, where all bets are off. They're just trying to feed Shea and Lou, and they don't have their A game. But they didn't do that. They played a really fundamentally sound basketball game. Shea did shoot 10 threes, but besides that, it was kind of a standard Thunder game, and they just really went wire to wire with the win. And then against New Orleans, whenever there's more fans dressed as seats than fans in the stands, they were able to take care of business. I think that last night against New Orleans can get a little spoiled because of the way that the Pelicans kind of came back in the second half. If it was an inverse of that, though, like if you had that second half as your first half and then your second half as your first half was a little tighter and your second half was how they played in the first half, people would be doing celebrations right now. So I don't have any concerns about that late, furious Pelicans comeback. But overall, I thought that the 0-0 mentality is truly real. That was my biggest thing that stood out. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, the whole 0-0 mentality thing, people can think of it as sort of like the Thunder's live, laugh, love approach of things, of it's just sort of this mantra. But the reality is they've been doing it for a while, and the more and more you do these things and win, guys are going to get more and more entrenched into those ideas and beliefs and really buy into it. And I'm with you. The New Orleans thing was unfortunate how it ended. It was kind of sour, but a win is a win, and that's the most important thing, how they got out of there. What really stood out to me was just how they took care of business throughout these games, where you mentioned it, Shea gets the 10 threes. They kind of had their cake and ate it too. But the Thunder came in, didn't really mess around, didn't take a bunch of bad shots in any of those three games, and just went to work and were just a well-oiled machine, especially generating turnovers. And offensively and defensively, as you get Caruso and Hartenstein back and some of these other guys, it looks more and more. This is the most gelled the team has looked to me, but I'm curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think that they are finding their chemistry. I think that Caruso, this is the most comfortable that he's looked in his Thunder tenure. And he looked that way right before that re-aggravation of his hip, and then he's kind of picked it right back up in these last two games since returning. So that feels like something that you can count on, of him being more comfortable. I think you've seen Cason Wallace become more comfortable as well. And then we've talked about Isaiah Joe really every week about the differences in him starting versus off the bench and how he's shown those flashes I think you're going to get to a point where the Isaiah Joe production is a bit more consistent. But the way that they've handled their business, I think, should give them credit. And I wonder if any of it is tied back to the fact that like a lot of these guys, were on that Thunder team and they're coached by the coach of that Thunder team where they would only win 20 something games. But you remember watching those teams, they wouldn't just like roll over and hand away games. Yes, they lost way more than they won, but those losses were not as though as like people could just waltz in and not even try and go beat them. So I think that they understood on the other end how much intensity that those teams are going to bring, like Toronto, who's pulled off a perfect rebuild to this point. Like Toronto has been a fun team to watch despite their record, and yet Thursday it was not fun at all. They just absolutely took Toronto behind the woodshed, and that does not happen to the Raptors a ton. But I think that the Thunder understanding because they've been in that same spot that you've got to bring that intensity night in and night out. It could have helped them a little bit in this season and has helped them in these past couple of years to not lower themselves to their competition. But overall, I thought the best game of the week was probably Utah, just because it was so much fun. Of like you had the game itself, you were able to blow them out, and then you had the aftermath of like everyone's checking the score of the Spurs game and checking the score of the Rockets game and seeing where the standings are going to fall. So I would say the best game of the week, Jazz. What about you?
I'd say the Toronto one, it just felt like a coming home, which it literally was, but just the way that those guys put on for their home country and just kind of just blew that team out where it just really wasn't in doubt that entire time. It didn't help Toronto that they didn't have Jakob Poeltl and then Hartenstein kind of dominated the boards, but overall, I really, really enjoyed that game, but I don't think there's a wrong choice to make here. But going back to a point you made about Isaiah Joe and Case and Wallace and those guys, that's another thing that stood out to me was Kaysen, Caruso, and Dort all sort of have their shot back. I mean, Dort's in a little bit of a different category with some of that mallet finger, but Kaysen and Caruso in particular knocking down threes. They made 13 in the last three games, and Caruso didn't even play in that first one against the Jazz. I thought was really, really important for this team long term.
Yeah, I thought that the guys kind of seeing themselves have a positive regression to the mean, if you will. They were the best 3-point shooting team a year ago, percentage-wise. They've shot more and haven't gotten quite to that marker yet this season. But I still do believe in some of the shot variant stuff. I know that we're getting deeper into the season. I don't know for you when you kind of take away the sample size stuff and just say this is who a team is. But for me, I'm not there yet because on the shot specifically for the Thunder, because when you see the quality of looks that they're getting, I never feel like, oh, that's a bad shot, or like, oh, he's never going to be able to make that shot. Like these are shots that I think the Thunder really crave in their offensive system. It's just to date they've been kind of inconsistent at seeing the ball go in, and now over this last week, as you mentioned, you've seen the ball, net, and so I think that that's what you've been waiting for Oklahoma City. So I still believe that they can get to a higher percentage as a team shooting the ball from three, as evidenced by these last couple of weeks. But perhaps, this is just going to be who they are for the rest of the season.
Yeah, between Lou Dort and Isaiah Joe, we've watched them enough where they are sort of streaky shooters where they'll have months where they just look unbelievable. And Isaiah's a little bit more consistent, obviously. That's just his reputation and his stats. But then you have other guys like Kaysen where we only have a 1-year sample size of him being a role player and shooting threes. So I was a little bit hesitant to sort of panic like a lot of fans I saw on Twitter about his shot because we know that he's an effective shooter. He didn't just forget how to shoot over the summer. And as for Caruso, he's a guy who we haven't seen as much of. And I think it really just took him a little bit of time, and Mark entrusted him with this of just sort of just finding his space on this team and his role. And I think you're really seeing that in the last couple of weeks, like you mentioned before, he re-aggravated his injury and then coming back now where he really seems to me like he's found his spots on this team of like, okay, here's exactly where I need to be, because it felt like for a while he was just sort of just feeling out the lay of the land and didn't want to shake things up too much.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that that's why I'm not concerned with the shooting, even though we're almost to Christmas. It's just that, one, Lou Dort actively has an injury. Alex Caruso has been nursing an injury all season long. And then with Kaysen, it was all stuff that did not raise any red flags to me. Like, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head of it's a second-year guy that had a cold streak. And if that cold streak happened in 3 months from now and he started out on a hot streak, no one would have really even registered it. But because it happened right out of the gate, it is the talk of the town. But I think that all these guys are collectively hitting their stride at the right time, because Tuesday, I think, is the biggest test to this point of the Thunder season against the Dallas Mavericks. We'll break that all down coming up. But first, I want to say right now, but our good friends over at Mint Mobile, go check out Mint Mobile today because with big wireless companies, you will never see what you're going to get with this Mint Mobile offer, because somewhere between your store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were going to pay was going to magically skyrocket with those big companies. But with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about that gotcha moment ever again. With Mint Mobile, whenever they say that it's $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they truly mean it. So say goodbye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overcharges and overusage and outages. You can get Mint Mobile instead, and they're here to rescue you with the premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. All the plans come with a high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered to you on a nation's largest 5G network. So use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with you so you have all your existing contacts. So make sure that you ditch the overpriced wireless companies and choose Mint Mobile's deal to get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15. This is for new customers on their offer. The new customers will get a new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/LockedInNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedInNBA to cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required is equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower after 40 gigabytes of unlimited plans. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joined today by Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. And we're both on Blue Sky also. So you can check us out there as well. But Michael, the Thunder found a way to enter Tuesday against Utah, not controlling their own destiny to even make the NBA Cup tournament, but they somehow made the tournament and also got the number 1 overall seed due to tiebreakers and how the rest of the games fell that night. So the Thunder are the number 1 overall seed in the NBA Cup, and they will be playing host on that blue court to the number 4 seeded Dallas Mavericks in a win or go home game in the quarterfinal for the right to punch your ticket to Vegas on what would be Saturday. You will see these two teams face off for the second time as an elimination kind of setting. The last time, of course, was Game 6 in Dallas, which did not go OKC's way. These two teams, very familiar. It seems like since the trade deadline last year, Dallas, of course, has been one of the best teams in the NBA, but they've also had the Thunder's number a bit. Where are you at first on just the overall essence of like Dallas versus Oklahoma City? Regardless of this individual matchup Tuesday, do you buy into, hey, the Mavericks are the best matchup for the Thunder? They kind of have their number.
Yeah, I'd buy into that. I mean, Luka and Jokic are the two best players that you're going to face in the West other than Shea, which obviously you're not going to play against him. And Jokic doesn't really have the guys backing him. So I think the Mavericks are the number 1 team that Thunder fans should look out for as sort of competition. And we saw it last year. Sort of those teams play out, and we saw what happened. Obviously, some big changes have happened where they had Klay Thompson for the Mavericks, Najee Marshall, and then the Thunder had Isaiah Hartenstein and some other guys, Caruso. We're still really not going to know until later on when both teams, if possible, are fully healthy. But this is one of those games that Thunder fans, or one of those matchups that Thunder fans probably had circled on their calendar, because this is what you sign Isaiah Hartenstein for in a lot of ways, is matchups like these where you saw Gafford and Lively sort of dominate the boards against Chet and Jay Will and some of the smaller lineups. So I'm really, really interested to see where Hartenstein sort of impacts this game and how much he impacts this game. But yeah, I tend to side with the idea that the Mavericks are sort of the team that the Thunder are measuring themselves up against in the West.
Yeah, I think that it's currently constructed, meaning like Tuesday and last year. If you only have one big healthy, and I think that Hartenstein's an incredible big, just like I think Chet's an incredible big. But if you only have one big healthy, the Mavericks do have the Thunder's number as currently constructed. Now, let's say that you get to March 27th and Chet Holmgren is back and Hartenstein's healthy, and now you got 2 centers, plus you got J-Dub and Shea and all the rest of the guys. Like, if you're healthy at that point, then the equation changes a bit, and I would not head into a series saying, oh, well, Dallas kind of really has the edge here. But I just think that it's too much to handle Dallas with just one center, especially because you're going to have to battle Gafford and Lively, which I think is what everyone talks about. But you're also going to have to play a segment of games without a rim protector on the floor. And when that's the case, and the other side has Luka and Kyrie, and yes, you have a ton of good perimeter defenders, but it's impossible to keep both those guys from their spots all game long. If they can get to your back line with no one at the rim, they're going to finish more often than not. They're going to win those minutes as they did a year ago, and it's just a little bit too much. I also think that Dallas has the edge in the sense of what we've talked about of role players. Like their role players I don't think are more talented than Oklahoma City's. I think that the Thunder, if you just like inspected their talent levels, would have more talent. But their role players are just more equipped for games like this because they're more willing shooters. They're more willing to do more on the ball. Even though the Thunder have given their players the freedom to, they just don't really exercise that freedom in the biggest spots. It feels like they're constantly passing up good opportunities, trying to get the ball back to their superstars, even though that's not what they're designed to do. I just think that the Mavericks have proven you that like Clay and PJ and these guys can go off, whereas the Thunder, like their version of going off is coming off of is playing off of Shea, and the Mavericks have done a good job of playing on a string and kind of taking that away from them. So who's going to be able to go create? Like you saw the last matchup, PJ Washington, for as much as you can complain about how great he was, he also only had 3 open shots. The Thunder defended him really well, but he just finished through traffic. He just went ahead and took contested shots and was able to create for himself, driving at the rim. And the Thunder role players just don't do that right now. And perhaps it'll flip for them eventually, and they'll start to make plays for themselves. But as of this moment, I have to kind of lean with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, and I'd hope that the two guys that sort of swing that are Hartenstein and Caruso in terms of the role players, secondary players that do sort of take on more of the mantle and responsibility of sort of getting the offense going, because that's the thing with a lot of the Thunder role guys last year is they're willing to take shots, but they have to be generated for them. Whereas PJ Washington, Klay Thompson, some of these guys, they'll just take it on upon themselves to sort of create some of these shots. And those two guys in particular are just fearless. Like Klay Thompson's a multi-time NBA champion, one of the greatest shooters of all time. An NBA Cup game in the middle of December doesn't resonate with him at all in terms of pressure. PJ Washington has been in a groove for the past 2 years. I mean, going back to whenever he was playing in Charlotte, remember he dropped almost like 40 or something in there whenever we were there, and an unbelievable game. So he's super, super comfortable, but it's going to come down to a lot of those role guys, as we've mentioned before, sort of just the grit. And that's another thing I wanted to mention. You mentioned Lively and Gafford, and just the grind that it takes, especially over a 7-game series, likely 6-7 games. Those guys are going to just wear you down, and that's what we saw against Chet, because those first 2 or 3 games, it seemed like he was fine, but just the miles that you put on guys like that really, really start to pile up. So I think for a one-off, the Thunder have a really, really nice chance to win this, but yeah, as you mentioned, if it's just as is constructed now, no Chet, I think that could be a much, much tougher equation. But yeah, if you get Chet back where both teams can have a 7-footer on the floor at all times, I think that's whenever it becomes really, really interesting.
Yeah, look, the Thunder can win this game on Tuesday, so can the Mavericks. I think that this is an ultimate toss-up game. I don't really blame anyone for picking either side in this contest, which is what I think makes it so fun. That's the right to go to Vegas. It really changes your entire landscape in the sense of your December month. So if the Thunder win and go to Vegas, they'll of course going to play Tuesday. They'll leave for Vegas, you would assume Thursday or Friday, and then they're going to be in Vegas if they win until Tuesday. And if they lose, they'll have to kind of scramble and kind of get back home Sunday or Monday from Vegas. Whereas if they lose to Dallas, then there's a chance that they're hosting the Houston Rockets on Sunday. And if that's because if the Rockets lose to the Warriors, then you're at home from today, where they got back from New Orleans, all the way through next Thursday with only 2 games to play. And after Tuesday, you'll only have 1 game to play until next Thursday. So now you basically have this in-season mini camp to where even if you lose, not that the team is going to head into it wanting to lose, but even if they did lose, it'd almost be kind of beneficial to have this little mini camp that you can rest and implement some things and clean up some things that you've seen early on. It just makes for this NBA Cup makes for this weird scheduling quirk where it's hard to really plan what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think the Thunder would ever just say it's we don't really care, we don't really want to win, but I'm going to have to see it to believe it in terms of Mark changing his rotations, in terms of maximizing minutes where Shea plays 42, 43 minutes like it is a playoff series, and I just don't really see that happening. who knows? Maybe it does get close down the stretch, but there's just not that many games where you're seeing like Shea plays the entire fourth like we would see in some playoff games. So the minutes are going to be really the metric and the telltale sign for me of just how serious the Thunder are taking this outside of Jay Will, obviously, who's taking it very seriously. But yeah, this game, if they do end up losing, it's not a bad thing. Like you mentioned, you get some extra rest for a team that's been incredibly banged up in a lot of spots between Caruso, Hardenstein, Jay Will, Kenrich, Chet, and others. Even Isaiah Joe's missed some time. So that wouldn't be the worst thing. But at the same time, seeing this team play in just a different context like this on sort of like win or go home is really, really interesting. So no matter what happens, as long as it's not just like a, knock on wood, just an embarrassing loss, I don't think there's really a losing equation here.
Coming up, we're going to make our picks for the NBA Cup and get you set for Tuesday night. But first, I want to say right now, but our friends over at FanDuel, go check out FanDuel today because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $5, can place a $5 bet and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So all you got to do is place that first $5 bet. If you win, boom, $150 in bonus bets for that win. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and it gives you everything to bet on live bets in the NFL, NBA, all in one place. You can also bet spreads, player props, over-unders, and more just by visiting FanDuel.com today to get started. And when you place that first $5 bet and you win it, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets. And you can go there right now. If you're not a big NBA, if you're not a big NFL fan, you more so like the NBA, guess what? You can bet on the association, including Tuesday night's game where the Thunder are 5-point favorites in the Paycom Center against the Dallas Mavericks, according to FanDuel. Go check them out today. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Here with Michael Martin at Michael on Sports on Twitter. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. Michael, first of all, do you like the NBA Cup floor, like the Thunder's floor, the blue trophy system?
The Thunder in particular I like. Some of the other ones, the yellow ones for like the Lakers are very, very hard to look at. I think we should side away from bright colors, but overall it doesn't really change anything, but I think it's a cool change up. What about you?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Thunders and like teams like the Thunders of like the blue, and it's just like it's loud, it feels different, it's like obviously popping, but it's not distracting. At least to me, it's not distracting. I know that other people like might have different eyes or whatever, but the ones that are distracting are like the bright yellow ones, and like those, it's truly hard to watch them and get through them just because it like puts a strain on my eyes. So I just think that the NBA should do a little bit of a better job of that. And I do feel bad for, like colorblind people of like, what a mess that is. Like Brendan Rabar, who's on this show a lot, and of course at dailythunder.com, he's colorblind, and he like talks about how it's like really tough to decipher what a player in a court is on at times in these tournaments because they might be wearing the same color jersey as the color of the court, and it's all coming through as the same color to him. So it's just kind of weird that they do that. But I do really like the Thunder's Cup. I like the Cup floors in general, like compared to last year, regardless of color, a lot more this year, where it's like that trophy behind the logo. It's not like that random strip down the side connecting the baselines in the lanes with the trophy kind of plopped over it. I think it's a much more subtle change. I just wish that it could parlay into bringing back the NBA Finals trophy, the Larry O'Brien on the Finals courts.
You get me going on that. We could go for a couple hours here, but my main takeaway from what you said is that that is evidence that nobody can be perfect if Brandon is colorblind.
Yeah, that's at least one deficiency he has. He does not have very many, but he cannot see the colors green. Like green, he said like green, brown, and some other colors like all look the exact same to him. So we were like quizzing him whenever we were recording Dream Team of like, what color shirt is Joe wearing? What color shirt is that? It was not a fun time for him, but it was fun for us. Now, the NBA Cup tournament is here. It's all set in place. Thunder, Mavericks. We both agree that the Mavericks have had the Thunder's number. Also, we both agree that this game could truly go either way. You mentioned how it comes down to minutes, of like which coach is going to be willing to play their stars more minutes. We both don't think that it'll be Mark that'll play them a ton. But by the same token, the Mavericks just have these random games where they just do not care. Like they just don't care. They don't put their best foot forward. But they've also won 6-7 in a row now after their win against Toronto. So they're clearly clicking on all cylinders. It truly makes this game a toss-up for me. I know the spread's 5 points for the Thunder. If I had to write my SI betting article today, I would pick the Mavs to cover just because I think it'll be a closer game than 5, and whoever wins. But ultimately, we have to make our picks. Lay it out for me Tuesday. What's going to happen? What are we going to go see in the Paycom Center?
First of all, I'd be shocked if the Mavericks walk through this one. Like, that team has a lot of pride. Jason Kidd's going to get them riled up as saying, the media, quote unquote, has this as the team that's going to beat you guys. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to come in here, prove them wrong or not? And Luke is a prideful guy. Kyrie, all those guys who want to come in here and win. I'm going to say that the Thunder exercise some of those demons. I don't know if they cover, like you mentioned. I think it's going to be a close one, but I think the Thunder really get out on the fast break, and we see some of the impact from Hartenstein and some extra growth from guys like J-Dub and Shea, and they eventually come out with the win.
Yeah, I think that this game will be a nip and tuck game the entire way, and it will be heartbreaking for whoever loses and exhilarating for whoever wins. I don't think this will be a game that the final 2 minutes you're just playing out the string that's kind of decided. I think it'll go down to the absolute wire. I'm going to pick Dallas. I just think that Dallas will get this win, but I don't really have a strong feeling of like, oh, I'd be willing to bet. I wouldn't even be willing to bet $2 on this game. Like that's how unconfident I am in what's going to happen. So we have the Thunder for you advancing to the semifinals, the Mavericks for me. Opposite side of the bracket, you have Rockets, Warriors in Houston. I think I'm going to go Rockets, even though they can't beat the Warriors. Like, how crazy is that they just cannot beat Golden State? But eventually they're due to win this game.
Eventually they are due, but I'm going to say it doesn't end here. There's some major big brother, little brother energy here that the Warriors have over the Rockets. And it is just odd. I'm going to take the Warriors, but I want to ask you about this. It is crazy how just like the three teams that are match up with the Thunder in the West are all teams that sort of are just weird matchups for OKC and just, to me, are just the most unbearable watches in a lot of ways because of just the grind that they are. But I just thought that was fascinating that we are going to get if the Thunder win, on the other side, you're going to see them play at least 2 out of the 3 teams that I feel like match up with them best in the West.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about this tournament is I think that the field really broke right for the Thunder in the sense of stress testing their guys, because you look at the December schedule, it is pretty brutal. Like, besides whoever they come out with in the Cup, no matter what happens in the Cup, they play next up after Dallas. They play Orlando, Miami, 2 teams who, like, Orlando does not have Franz or Paolo. They should not be able to hang with OKC. Miami's been inconsistent. They should not be able to hang with OKC. They have Washington, Indiana, Charlotte. Only one of those games even makes you think. And then Memphis and Minnesota to end in the month. But like this month, which only has seen Houston, Dallas so far, Memphis and Minnesota be quality opponents, like they need some of these high-level games. And not only are they weird matchups, they're matchups where it's like pretty emotional of like, no matter what, if they win or lose to Dallas, they're going to play the other loser or winner, whichever order it happens. So even if you play the Rockets, well, you just had a little kerfuffle with Houston last week, and these are 2 of the top teams in the West so far, and you're going to see kind of how that game plays out. And then if you're Golden State, we know the history there of like, Draymond calling out the barking and the Shea Curry Instagram stuff, where Curry responded this year. Like, they have not only quirks on the court that present interesting matchups, but also some storylines off the court that really intrigue you for like how emotionally will that game play out? Like, how invested will these guys be when you know that they might get up for Dallas, they might get up for Houston, might get up for Golden State more so than any other team?
Yeah, I think that's a good thing you mentioned the stress test, because this is once again a stress test, I'd say mostly for the role players, of just playing in these bigger game environments where your emotions do take over, where big games are one thing. We've seen this in the regular season. Like, we saw it when they played Houston. You saw it when they played Golden State and Dallas earlier this year. But just the added weight of it just being like, I know the Cup doesn't mean a lot to certain people, but just, national TV game, the courts are different. It's just a different vibe, I think, is really, really good to sort of test a lot of these guys, because, Caruso, when was the last time you played in a big game? Like since the bubble, like the Bulls have not been fantastic other than they made the first round one time and got blitzed by the Bucks, I think, on the way to the ring. So You also have a lot of role players, guys like Aaron Wiggins, who needs to step up, Isaiah Joe, Cason Wallace, AJ Mitchell's going to get some minutes. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting. Win or lose, it's not the end of the world, but this is a really good sort of like, I appreciate the in-season tournament, mid-season tournament, NBA Cup as just sort of an extra carrot for these teams of just like, let's see how we look in this context that sort of mirrors the playoffs more than any other aspect of the regular season.
I agree. So I've got Mavericks, Rockets in Vegas semifinal. I'm going to go Mavericks to the title. You've got Thunder, Warriors. Who's going to make it to the NBA Cup championship?
I think the Thunder get this one too. With or without Steph, I think the Thunder get this one. I think the Thunder have this Warriors team's number now that they're finally adjusted and they have Hartenstein, because I think they were on their way to a win before Chet's injury. But yeah, J-Dub is a matchup nightmare for that team as well at the small ball, because if you want to match small ball for small ball, God bless Draymond, but that's just not happening guarding Dub in the open floor. So I'll take the Thunder.
So then you have the Thunder the title, I have the Mavericks in the title. Out east, you have quickly Bucks, Magic, and then New York and Atlanta. Bucks, Magic. I'm going to go Bucks now. I mean, I don't know how they're going to compete with Franz and Paolo out.
Yeah, got to be the Bucks, especially Franz out. I love the story of the Magic. They've been one of my favorite league pass teams, but without both those guys, that's just impossible.
And then you have New York and Atlanta. Like, New York's forgotten how to play defense. They don't really have the personnel down low with Mitchell Robinson out to play defense. And Atlanta, who is, just a middling team in the Eastern Conference. Like, at times they show flashes because of the young guys that can have a good night, but other times are just like a brutal watch. Where are you going to lean on New York, Atlanta?
Atlanta is the best team in the league in terms of playing up or playing down to their competition, in my opinion, where they'll lose to the Wizards twice and then they'll go and beat the Celtics. Like, it's so weird. I'm going to go with the Hawks here. It's going to be in Madison Square Garden. You know that Trey is going to be at a 10 over there. Both teams are really going to want this, but I really like the depth and sort of what we've seen from Atlanta this year with guys like Jalen Johnson and sort of just filling in the gaps.
So I'm going to stick with my Atlanta pick as well and go to Atlanta, Milwaukee. That's where it's going to be in Vegas, and I'll take Milwaukee, and I've got Milwaukee, Dallas. You've got Milwaukee versus Atlanta, and you have...
I'm going to go with Atlanta. They feel like the Pacers team from last year, of just this overachiever in the regular season and an NBA Cup type team that can get really, really hot from three, so I'm going to go with them.
And Atlanta is a major airport hub, so perhaps it'll be easy for Hawks fans to flood Vegas, and they'll have a huge home court advantage in Vegas. But overall, I have the Mavericks, the Western team for me, winning the NBA Cup championship. Is your NBA champion also in the West?
It is. I'm going to take the Thunder. It's going to be my homer pick here, but I don't know. They match up pretty well with every team here. I think that they match up best with Atlanta of any teams that we're going to talk about in terms of like the teams in the West. Maybe Milwaukee would be a more difficult one, or maybe even the Knicks, but I think Atlanta gets there just due to their hot shooting and sort of just how high tempo their offense can be. But I've got the Thunder winning that one and sort of putting a stamp on this early portion of the season as a team that has arrived and is very, very serious going into the playoffs.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you joining us again this week. Let them know what you got cooking up. Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. And, of course, follow me on Twitter at Michael on Sports.
Yep, Let's Talk Thunder on YouTube. We are 10 subs away from 1,000. Very, very close. This week, it will be the J-Dub video of him at the 5 and sort of how that's all come to be. I've got some great quotes from Mark and Hartenstein and other ones. And then the following week will just be sort of revisiting and reviewing the first 10 or so games of Hartenstein with this new Thunder team.
A lot of good stuff coming up there. A lot of stuff that you guys are interested in with J-Dub and Hartenstein. Again, follow Michael on Twitter at Michael on Sports. I'm on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And until next time, be good and be good to one another.